Rather than spending your time researching all over the internet or paying money for this exact information in some online course, I'm giving this information to you for free because I believe that every woman should know about their reproductive cycle and be empowered with the tools to understand what's going on each cycle. And because this information is free, I would so appreciate you following the channel, giving this video a like, and sharing it with someone who could also use this information. Be sure to check out the companion guide. The companion guide will give you everything you need to track your cycle, including the cycle tracking chart and tips on how to do this, because anytime you do something the first time, it can be a little tricky. So let's dive into this together. Now that we have a base understanding of the 4 phases of the cycle, we're going to go into the 3 biological markers that you can use as tools to optimize your fertility and know exactly when ovulation is happening each month. I like to think of this as the detail layer. So we have our base, our core, and now we're sprinkling in the detail to really become experts at our cycle. I'm going to walk you through how to use cervical fluid, basal body temperature, and cervix position to optimize your chances of getting pregnant. So let's start with my personal favorite, cervical fluid. You might not know this, but you need 3 things in order to get pregnant. Of course, you need an egg, a sperm, and you need a conduit for sperm to reach the egg. In the vaginal canal, sperm has a really low survival rate, and that's because for the majority of your cycle, the vaginal canal is too acidic for sperm to survive, except during your fertile window. During the time leading up to ovulation, your cervical fluid changes to become a supportive conduit for sperm to reach the egg. Now you might be like, what are you talking about? If you're anything like me, when I was growing up, any fluid down there I thought was just from sexual arousal or an infection. And I had no understanding of what was actually happening in my uterus every cycle. So let's break this down. Now we know, of course, during menstruation, we have our period, we have a blood flow, and there is a lot of amazing knowledge in that type of flow, whether you're seeing blood clotting, brown blood, red blood. Once all of that ends and you enter into your follicular phase, cervical fluid is going to start to work her magic. I want you to pay attention to the different qualities of what cervical fluid can look like and make notes about the cervical fluid that you're seeing in your body. There's a couple goals with this. 1, you want to make sure that you're seeing this pattern of cervical fluid, which would indicate a healthy hormone level. And 2, use that knowledge to optimize your chances of getting pregnant. And we'll talk about troubleshooting and frequently asked questions at the end. So once your period ends and you enter into your follicular phase, you're going to notice a couple days of what we call dry cervical fluid. This is a period in which there is no cervical fluid present. If you were to notice on your underwear or feel for cervical fluid up in the vagina, you wouldn't feel anything. It's what we call dry. As you approach ovulation, during your follicular phase, when estrogen is rising and then luteinizing hormone and FSH, your cervical fluid starts to change. And first we see what's called sticky cervical fluid. Sticky can also be like flaky. And you might notice on your underwear just some like flaky residue at the end of the day or during the day. Now, as you get to know your beautiful body more, you'll notice for you what this cervical fluid looks and feels like, whether you're noticing some flaky fluid on your underwear, or if you do check for cervical fluid and you feel something that's a little more sticky in quality, that means that you're getting closer to ovulation, but it's still not a very supportive fluid for sperm yet. In the days closer to ovulation, when you're almost there, the cervical fluid starts to change to be what we call creamy in quality. This looks and feels almost like lotion. It's typically white in coloration, and creamy fluid has a higher water content. So you might notice more of a circular pattern on your underwear when you're noticing cervical fluid, rather than the streaky lines of like the sticky or dry. This is going to be much more of a round watermark like fluid. It'll be interesting to see what your creamy quality is like for you. Now, during ovulation, when the LH and the FSH hormones are at their highest and the egg is released, cervical fluid changes to become what we call egg white. And it truly looks like an egg white. It is clear, it's very stretchy in consistency, and this is due to the high water content that's in the egg white cervical fluid. And this is the most supportive fluid for sperm to get past the cervix and to reach the egg. This is a very fertile quality fluid that only happens around ovulation. Now, after ovulation, cervical fluid completely dries up, and this is intentional because the female body is trying to protect anything from passing the cervix to get up toward that beautiful egg in the event that conception did occur. So it's going to dry up, not let anything else in, including like bacterias or anything like that. And so after ovulation, you should not see much cervical fluid at all. Then right before your period starts, you might see a little bit of fluid because the hormone changes are happening, and it might look a little bit like creamy or sticky, and that's totally normal. What we're looking for after ovulation is another period of dry or no cervical fluid. When I first learned this, I was like, wow, why does this happen? And it's because of the hormone changes happening in the body and your beautiful body's intuitive sense to conceive. Now, women are not fertile during their whole cycle. They're only fertile, meaning we can only conceive during ovulation. And this is because of all of these beautiful biological markers that are happening. Men, on the other hand, are fertile every day. They can generate sperm every day. Women, however, cannot conceive every day. We can only conceive during ovulation when the cervical fluid is present to support sperm. As you start to get to know your cycle more, you're going to want to make notes about these changes in cervical fluid. So let's review. You'll have your period with your bleeding. Once that stops, you'll have a couple days of really no fluid at all, or what we call dry. Then you'll see cervical fluid start to change from sticky to creamy to egg white. And that looks a little bit different. Some clients that I've worked with, it all happens within a period of like 2 days. For other women, it happens over a couple days. So you want to get to know what it's like for your body. Then during ovulation, we see that egg white-like cervical fluid. Once ovulation ends, again, no cervical fluid is present. It dries up as a protection mechanism in the body. You might be wondering, well, what if I don't see cervical fluid? I don't see this change happening at all in my body. That might be an indicator that something bigger is going on for you, whether that's something bigger with your hormone health, something bigger in your body. And the key here is having an awareness so that you have the knowledge and now the power to do something about that. The next thing you might consider is any medications you're taking. In general, if you're taking a medication that's designed to dry up mucus in the body, which could be mucus up here in the nose or the throat or the chest, it's also going to dry up the cervical mucus in the vaginal canal. So taking things like a regular allergy medicine could also be impacting your cervical fluid. I had a client who she was so frustrated. She never saw cervical fluid. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no fluid. And I was like, well, are you taking allergy medicine? And she's like, yeah, I take Claritin every day. When she stopped taking the Claritin every day and she switched to more natural methods for controlling her allergy problems, she then started seeing cervical fluid literally within the next cycle. It came back so fast. Another thing that can help cervical fluid production is being well hydrated. There's a really high water content in cervical fluid, and if you're dehydrated, then there's not going to be enough there to produce a lot of cervical fluid. So make sure you're hydrating your beautiful body with water, and you can see a change in your cervical fluid right away. Another question I get a lot is like, when will I see this? Now, it may take a couple cycles to get to know these changes in your cervical fluid, and I encourage you to write down the changes that you are seeing, and you will start to see a pattern. And what some women are surprised by is how quick this all happens. Remember, ovulation is only a 12 to 24-hour period of time. And the days leading up to this can happen really fast. If you're busy at work, if you're on a trip, if you're doing something big in your life, these days could fly by and you could miss this fertile window really easily. So it does take some diligence in tracking and getting to know your cycle every day for you to get the power and the knowledge that's here. So now that we know about cervical fluid, let's dive into another fascinating biological marker, which is cervix position. I have to be honest, this is so embarrassing. When I was trying to get pregnant, I did not know where my cervix was. And I don't know, do other people know that? Like where their cervix is? I had no idea. I remember having to ask my friend, like, is it in there? Like when you put your finger up there, like the thing that you're feeling, is that your cervix? And she's like, yeah, now I know. So if you're like me, I will tell you. If you were to insert a tampon or your finger or anything, not anything, don't put anything up there, into the vagina, what you feel at what would be the back of your vagina is your cervix. It's a donut-shaped tissue that is the gate between your vagina and your uterus. And so if you were to, with clean washed hands, go up and feel in through the vagina, you can actually feel your cervix. And there is an amazing change that happens. So let's learn about it. As you reach ovulation, the quality of the tissues of the cervix actually change. They become soft and more open to allow sperm to pass through the cervix and go up to fertilize the egg. Now, joined with cervical fluid, the cervix becomes soft, more open, and wet for that sperm to move up and through. A lot of people don't know this, but sperm don't have a sense of direction. So the female body has to give sperm a lot of help to get up to the egg. It's just the truth. After ovulation and outside of the fertile window, the cervix closes up and becomes more hard and becomes more dry because there's no cervical fluid present. I'll give you a visual so you can know a little bit better what to look for. So when you feel up and feel your cervix, you're going to feel what feels like the end of your nose, like this cartilage feeling when you're outside of your fertile window. When the body is not ready to conceive a baby, it's going to become a little bit more hard when you feel it up there. It's going to be closed and it actually drops down a little bit. So it might be easier for you to feel because the cervix itself is dropped down in the vagina a little bit more. Now, when it is time to conceive right around ovulation, and of course during ovulation, the cervix tissues become more like your lips, a lot softer, squishier. It's going to open a little bit more and of course be wet from the cervical fluid, and it becomes higher in the body. So if you're feeling for your cervix around ovulation, it might be a little bit harder to feel because the cervix tissues are actually a little bit higher in the vaginal canal. Now, this might be the first time that you're ever feeling this part of your body, and it can come with some apprehension, some questioning. So I encourage you to wash your hands, take a deep breath, and get to know your beautiful body. Feel for your cervix and feel what it feels like. This is something you could feel for every day or every few days because the changes are subtle and they're only happening right around ovulation, and then they go back to their closed feeling, because it can be really empowering to know and to feel the beautiful changes happening in your body for the first time. Now that we know about cervical fluid and cervix position and how those work together to really open and bring sperm up through the cervix to implant into the egg, let's talk about basal body temperature. Basal body temperature is like this sneaky indicator that is really cool, in my opinion. So let's dive into it. Basal body temperature is the term for your body's temperature when at rest. So the best time to measure your basal body temperature is right when you wake up in the morning. before you get up and go potty, before you take a drink of water, if you were to measure your temperature, that would be your basal body temperature. The interesting thing about basal body temperature is before ovulation, your temperatures are generally lower than after ovulation, where your temperatures jump a little bit higher. And every time I work with a client who's hearing this for the first time, they are so surprised. And it's such a fun thing to see on your chart. So when you wake up in the morning, you'll use the same thermometer to track your temperature. You simply put it in, track your temperature, and mark down on the chart what your temperature is. And you'll continue to track your temperatures through your whole cycle. And what you'll start to get is a chart where the temperatures are lower before ovulation, and then they jump up after ovulation and remain higher. And what this does is it gives you knowledge and confirmation that ovulation did happen. When you're tracking your cycle, you'll be tracking your temperatures and you'll be noticing your cervical fluid changes. You might feel that your cervix is becoming more open, soft, and squishy, ready for sperm to come through. And then you see that egg white-like cervical fluid during ovulation. And then the next day, when you take your temperature will be higher than it was before. And that confirms that ovulation happened and your temperatures will remain high throughout the luteal phase. And this is the basic pattern we are looking for in a healthy cycle. So let's talk about some questions around basal body temperature. A question I get all the time is, do I have to take my temperature every day? And the answer is, yeah, there's no way around it. When you want to get to know ovulation and you're really looking for the health of your cycle, taking your temperature every day is the best way to do that. Now, you don't have to take your temperature at the same time every day, just when you wake up. I know that changes for some people, and it's really about measuring your body at rest. So whatever that temperature is at rest is what you want to be measuring and marking down. If you miss a day, that's okay. You just skip that over in your chart and continue charting on. Now, it's also important to know that there are things that will impact your temperature in the body. Of course, getting sick can raise your temperature. Drinking alcohol can also raise your temperature. Sometimes traveling on vacation and doing other things rather than your normal routine can impact your body's temperature. So you can make some notes on your chart about what's going on in your life to make sense of what you're seeing on your chart. Another question that's commonly asked is, what if I'm not seeing this pattern of low temperatures and then high temperatures? And this is the beauty of having this data. If you're not seeing the pattern of low and then high, this is data that you now have to work with for your cycle. This can indicate whether there's something bigger going on in your body, or if you have the opportunity to focus on something bigger in your body. Now that you have this data, you can work with me one-on-one, or you can take this information to your doctor and say, hey, there's something going on with my cycle. Can we do some tests? Let's recap and talk about the true magic that is these 3 fertile biological markers. So as you move through the 4 phases of your cycle, from your period to the follicular phase, ovulation, and then the luteal phase, you'll notice that the basal body temperature, your cervix position, and your cervical fluid are all changing along with this beautiful cycle. So first you'll have your period. Once that ends, you'll enter into the follicular phase where your cervical fluid is going to go from dry to sticky to creamy to egg white right at ovulation. The cervix itself is changing, and as you get closer to ovulation, it is becoming softer, more open, and higher up in position. And then your basal body temperatures are remaining lower around this time. During ovulation, this is a big moment for your cycle. And this is when the egg is released because of the LH and the FSH hormones. Cervical fluid changes to become egg white, and the cervix is at its most open, soft position so that sperm can come through to fertilize the egg. Once ovulation ends, your luteal phase begins. Progesterone starts to rise in the body, which shuts down the production of cervical fluid. So you won't see any more cervical fluid. The cervix itself closes and becomes hard again to keep out anything from the environment. And your basal body temperature jumps up and remains higher after ovulation. Now, A little bit of magic here. If you do, in fact, conceive and you are pregnant, your temperatures will remain high. And you'll know that you're pregnant without even taking a pregnancy test because you're tracking your basal body temperature. How cool is that? If you see your temperature start to drop towards the end of your cycle, then that indicates that your period will start in the next few days because your temperatures are dropping and your cycle will start over. I hope that you can take all of this knowledge and apply it to your cycle and really feel out what it feels like in your body to see these changes and become aware of the beautiful magic that's happening within you. You can use the chart for this course to chart all of these different signs, and I find it really fun to start to see the pattern over time. And be sure to check out the companion guide. The companion guide will give you everything you need to track your cycle, including the cycle tracking chart and tips on how to do this, because anytime you do something the first time, it can be a little tricky. So get the companion guide today.